text.
If you didn't get my invite.
He didn't get it, so re-invite him.
You always have to invite Russ twice to things, man. It's like
he's worth it though. He's worth inviting twice.
It's worth a double invite. You know, I mean, it's just like
There he is.
Some people you just invite once and they come, and then some people you have to invite twice. Like Russ, you have to invite twice.
I would just guess once. That's not on me.
What if you invite him twice? Does that mean he gets to bring a guest?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, it should be HockeyBuzzCast +1. You know, like you're allowed to come and bring somebody. You want the steak or the salmon? It's up to you. Completely up to your call.
Do you always take the salmon, or do you never take the salmon?
I never take salmon. I think salmon is the fish of the fish of the poor. I think it's.
What?
Are you insane?
You are insane.
I mean, my God, salmon. First of all, salmon is not.
It's been completely. It's been shoved into our face as a fish that's not. It
is not cheap.
No, it can be luxurious. You have to get either like sockeye or you get the right stuff.
Right.
Whiting is the fish of the poor. Like, you get whiting, then you're talking.
No.
It feels like the Alexander Daigle of fish. Like
the fish of the poor, Russ, is haddock.
Yes. Yes.
Haddock is famous in Buffalo for the beer battered fish fry with about 5,000 French fries to cover up the fact that you have a piece of haddock.
A lot better than salmon. That's the thing. Like to me.
No,
I'm not poor. I just mean.
Here's the problem with fish fries. If you dip any fish in grease long enough, you can make it taste good.
That's
very true.
Yeah, you batter it up and dip it in grease. I don't care what it is. Tilapia, like the tilapia scandal is one of the greatest scandals of our generation.
Tilapia. What the hell? We've talked about this, Kevin. What is a tilapia?
No. Well, I just read that that's now overfished, and we're going to have to come up with a new fish.
Yeah.
Just like that.
It's just as well. Tilapia is the most fattening of fish. It's got like more fat than actually like a hamburger.
So.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, orange roughy extinct? Like that's a fish we don't see anymore. So did orange roughy go extinct? I was just curious about that.
I think so.
It was the pet rocks of fish. I mean, it just came and.
I'll give you one that used to be on every table when I was a kid, especially after Passover and after you're done with the Seder and stuff. Sturgeon. You don't see sturgeon anymore. That was a nasty fish.
That was like licking a Norwegian sewer.
Well, see, whitefish used to be popular, but they considered it racist to have just whitefish, so they did away with it.
Well, whitefish is just cod, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a cod, yeah.
But sturgeon is the worst. I mean, sturgeon is like eating cat food to me. Like there's nothing.
I've never even had sturgeon.
You would, yeah.
Not a Midwest thing, so.
You had Jewish relatives, you would have had it. I don't know why it ended up on so many holiday plates. It's awful.
Well, what is that? Is that like? I mean, I've been in some of the nicest nicest Jewish parties I've ever been to. Like these beautiful bat mitzvahs where they're serving us lobster in in a man's hat, and yet there's also over there's there's sturgeon.
I know. It's to keep grandma happy.
Yeah, this is a rather fishy.
Remind you of the good old days when you couldn't have 2 cents to rub together. Sturgeon. It's literally like taking the worst part of a bad fish and putting it on a table. Like
the funny thing is that as I've gotten older, I've been able to appreciate different varieties of fish, more than I was when I was a kid. And the thing is now, the one thing that is very popular that I can't stand is like a tuna steak, being
Seriously?
What don't you like about tuna steak?
Tuna steak is awesome.
I don't like tuna, but it's like I figured the way.
Well, that's a fundamental problem.
Well, there is an issue there. You shouldn't be having a tuna steak if you don't like
that.
That
tends to be the funniest thing ever. Trying to figure out why he doesn't love tuna steak. Well, I don't like tuna. Well, it's almost understandable because there is a thing like we grew up eating. And my mom and my niece, they're driving down to Florida to compete their dog in a major competition. So they're listening to the show. And I grew up on tuna fish casserole, which is like a different so I grew up with that being tuna fish, and of course when I don't really think tuna was really served as a steak fish back then, or at least
no, it wasn't.
Does your tuna fish casserole has potato chips in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe it did have chips in it.
Yeah. Well, they always did in the Midwest, but I've talked to people who've had tuna fish casserole in other areas of the country, and they did not have potato chips.
Mine did not. But I'll tell you, the secret ingredient of ours was always, and it ended up being like Campbell's mushroom soup, but any mushroom soup is the secret ingredient.
Oh, well, Campbell's mushroom soup only exists because it's the secret ingredient to other things. We know this, right? That's the only reason the whole thing exists. Like it's that thing that you make with green beans and onions for every Thanksgiving that everybody has to have.
Yeah, I still think the weirdest product name ever invented was chicken of the sea for a tuna fish.
Right.
Where's their chicken?
Yeah, right. That wasn't shooting high for tuna. You know, that's the thing. Like, if they should be the beef of the sea or something. I mean, you're not shooting high to go for chicken. Like, that's like.
Remember, that confused Jessica Simpson too. So, Mike, you're pretty much on the same brainwave as Jessica Simpson. So, good luck with that.
We have finally connected, Mike, with Jessica Simpson. It took 190 shows.
The final word on fish.
Okay.
You know, when I grew up being a Catholic kid, you know, on Fridays we always had fish, and you always went to the fish fry. Fish and chips was kind of a staple. You know, you'd find a place and they'd serve a lot of those on Friday. You know, as everyone knows, the UK is known for its fish and chips. So you have grown up on American fish and chips. So you go over and you think, okay, now I'm going to have some real fish and chips, and you go over to the UK. I eat their fish and chips, and they don't taste, you know, like they're not delicious to me because I've grown up on United States fish and chips, which are completely different.
That is interesting. I know I've had that same experience in getting fish and chips like at a good like Irish bar or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get the fish and chips here, and there's no taste. Like
no, but you know what? The fish and chips in Ireland are the best. The French fries in Ireland are the best French fries you'll ever eat in the world.
Yeah, the fries. I find the fries are fantastic in the UK. But the fish, I find, I just don't enjoy it as much as I do, you know, the cod or haddock that you have here in the U.S. So.
Well, I haven't spent as much time overseas in the last like 20 years, but I was in France for about 3 months, back in like the early 90s. And the thing that kind of struck me back then about Europe was, and this will get off of food, we must be hungry, all hungry. But you know, the thing that struck me the most is how the concept of all you can eat in Europe doesn't exist. That's like a very American thing. Like you can't go to like an all you can eat salad place, or like a Sizzler just wouldn't exist in Europe, right? It's just not possible that could possibly. Not that I frequent Sizzlers, but you want that to exist in Europe because you're completely hungry. I was completely hungry all the time because everything was the really small portions, and I was just dying to go to a place where I could eat all I possibly could. And the way at least back then, you know, getting meat and like fish and all that was really kind of rare. Like meat's not a big thing. Like we grew up in, you know, we're close to Texas. We're beef people here, but man, in Europe that was like the meat wasn't even very good. That you got, it was the one that I got back then. It was, I don't know. You go over to Europe on more nighty rest, but that's crazy.
I only went once. I've been more than you.
That's one more than me.
That's not more than me. You're right. Because I've been twice.
One more than me.
All right, there we go. Kevin's actually the world traveler in here. I mean, he's, you know, in Russia and everywhere. You know, he's been all over. What was the food like in Sochi? Was it good?
No, it was fine. You know, the Olympics is never a good judge because they know that you know, they're having a lot of international travelers. They're on their best food behavior. You know, like
you're not eating the.
Let's hope that's the case for the next Winter Olympics, and they don't serve dog that month. We'll see.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, I'm out on dog. You know.
No, that's not gonna happen. All right,
let's
begin. I don't know how to transition into hockey from here, but I'm.
Well, why don't we do this?
Speaking of being out on dog.
Why don't we do this?
We're retiring the poor Winnipeg Jets logo.
Yes.
If they just wore their own uniforms, they would have been fine.
As they go on the wall of shame.
They need to wear their old uniforms. They would have been fine.
So on our predictions, I'm starting out strong. I'm 1-0.
Me too.
Woo!
Yes, I predicted.
I'm 0-1.
I'm 0-1. I picked the Jets in 7.
Yeah, me too. And
I mean, do you feel worse that you picked the team to win who got swept?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like a fool.
Because, you know, to be brutally honest, I never put much stock in the, you know, predictions. I'm just kind of a, you know, I do it because it's expected, but
right.
it's just a, I always tell folks when they ask me, I said the only difference between a sports writer and a fan is the sports writer knows that we don't really have any hope of accurately forecasting what's going to happen because we know enough about the game to know that there are so many factors.
Right.
That's
and
true.
you also know as a national writer, like that predicting is just doom. Like you can't get around it, like because you're going to pick against people all the time. Like no matter who you pick, you're going to piss off people. So it's
I mean, you do the best you can. I mean, like I always tell folks, I really do try to analyze and figure out, but I also know as soon as I do it that, who knows? I mean, what's really going to happen?
Anything's possible, right? I mean, the next show we're going to do with Cranky Hockey Writer show, I'm all ready to gloat about my Montreal prediction with you guys. And
well, you should. I mean, you were right on that. But, I always tell GMs this all the time, and it really, I shouldn't say all the time, but I've mentioned to a few of them, and it really irritates them. But here's the thing. When a GM makes a trade or he drafts someone or, he makes any kind of move, he's just guessing.
Yes.
I mean, he's just guessing. And, I remember I did an interview with Harrison, and it was one of the funniest interviews I ever did. I wanted to do a piece on all the great trades he had made because he had made a lot of great trades. And he started laughing. He goes, well, don't you want to ask me about my worst trades?
Right.
And he listed like 4 or 5 trades that he made were utter disasters. And his point, was basically making my point of, you're making educated guesses because you've been around and you know the players and you have a history, but at the end of the day, you're still guessing. You're still guessing whether that's the right move.
Oh yeah, it's a great point.
Peter Chiarelli is one of the best general managers in the National Hockey League, but the Tyler Seguin deal is something he might not he'll live it down because he'll get another job.
But that was forced on him.
I know it was forced on him, but in the pantheon of down the line a few years, people are going to forget the reasons why, and they're just going to see Tyler Seguin, leading at the top 5 in the top 5 of the league, and the fact that they traded him, they basically undid the coup of the Phil Kessel deal.
But this is the thing about this, and then we're kind of starting the show anyway. We'll just introduce ourselves in a second. But the idea is, I talked to a GM recently who said this really kind of summed it up in a way I'd never heard before. He said he just doesn't. He really gets upset when they play out the trades beyond a year or two. He said because that to him that's really the bottom line is. A trade is as good as it is the first or second, maybe second year. He said, but beyond that, he's like, there's so many variables with players getting hurt and different things happening and the team's in a different place. If you're addressing something that's helping, does that trade fix something for you for the next year? That's his thing. Is it going to fix it for the next year? You can't reason. Of course, you don't want to trade away young players and all that stuff. And there's obvious stuff. But he said when it comes to player for player trade, and he was even talking about the Seguin trade. He's like that trade, for Boston was okay at first, and
it depends on the type of deal it was. If we're dealing with we're dealing with a deal like the Kessel deal, you can't evaluate it until 3 or 4 years down the line.
Right. I mean, there's certain trades that are definitely made that they're a prospect trade. Like the Kessel thing was for players that we don't even know who they are. I mean, we're talking about draft picks that are going to be there. But the Seguin trade was pretty much a player trade, right?
Yeah.
Bradley Smith had a bad year. He had a good year. 2 years ago, he looked really good. Last year, when they were winning the President's Trophy, no one was really talking about the Seguin trade last year as a bad thing. They were okay. I mean, they weren't saying it was the greatest trade in the world, but they knew that, like Russ said, it was forced upon him. And at the end of the day,
nobody thought that was a fair trade when it was made. I remember analyzing that trade, saying, "Yeah, he got what he could. He got like 20 cents on the dollar."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think too sometimes I think it's harder for a longtime GM to trade a player than a new guy. To me sometimes you get so close to the players that it's difficult to see the the warts. I mean, we've seen that. That's sort of been a problem in the NHL is that GMs sort of get married to their players. And it's hard to when that happens, when you get married to your players, you start to overvalue them.
Well, that's happened with the Sharks for sure.
Yeah. You overvalue them, and you think they're more, like the value around the league isn't the same as what you think it is.
Well, and it's such human nature. It's so. I mean, it's really you can't blame them for doing it. I mean, if you've been on a team, or coached, even like coached, like I'm coaching a girls' soccer team, right? And those players, there's better players out there, but I love my players. I wouldn't move them around. They're our team. That's our team, and I think that plays into it with these guys. It just, you're around them all the time. They become your team, and certain fan bases especially. This is kind of what I've liked so far about Jim Nill. I really feel like Jim Nill does not do that. I feel like he has made trades based on what he really thinks is best for the team, and sometimes that's moving a player that he probably thinks is a good player, but and you could argue, I guess he hasn't been there that long, but still.
Yeah, but I will say this: I know Nill really well, and I know Kevin knows him really well. He's such a good talent evaluator that I think he gets over the I love the player thing because he does look at talent first.
Right. Right, and there are not that many of them. I mean, we have a real problem. Kevin's right. There aren't that many of those kind of GMs in the league. I mean, if we had 30 Jim Nills, we would have a hell of a fun trade deadline. But we don't have 30 Jim Nills. We have like.
Yeah, this is. I'm going to say something too that a GM would just shoot me over. But every once in a while, you hear a fan will send you a trade.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and the logic of it is really, really sound, and yet if you got a GM involved in it, he'd say, well, I couldn't do that because, this guy, he feels just different because he knows the personalities. Now, it doesn't happen all that often. Most fan trades are, can a lot of them can be ridiculous. But
right. Go ahead, Russ.
At the trade deadline, I want to say this was probably 10 years ago. So Glenn Sader makes a trade. We're all there at the deadline, and he trades a guy who I really liked as a player, Mike York. Everybody remembers Mike York. He trades him for Rem Murray, and nobody in the room believes that this trade went down. Nobody understands it, and of course, I'm the one left to ask Glenn Sader the question. Well, what do you think Rem Murray can do that Mike York? How could you replace Mike York? Basically, what could Rem Murray replace? And Glenn Sader's answer was, well, Rem Murray can do everything Mike York can, but in retrospect, he couldn't. And it was one of those things where we all saw it, and goes to what Kevin says, but Sader didn't. Sader saw that, hey, Rem Murray is a veteran. I need a veteran. York is valuable, but he's not that valuable, and this guy can pretty much take his place. But you know what? When it came to like those intangibles and stuff, he couldn't.
Well, here's the other element too about hockey that's really fascinating. These are multi-million-dollar businesses. We all know what the salary cap is, how much is spent on player salaries, and yet oftentimes trades come down to the evaluation of one $100,000 pro scout.
Yes.
Who goes and watches the guy 5 or 6 times. Now, there's some great pro scouts, and most of them have been played in the NHL and they know their business. But I'm just saying. Like a GM can watch a lot of games, but he's got to worry about his team. He can't scout every player. Now, if you make the major trade, they do get around. But oftentimes, he's got to base his judgment on those scouting reports that he gets from the guys that are out and watching the games for 2 periods and then taking off.
It's a great point. I mean, these guys are driving around, staying in Red Roof Inns, living out of the back of their car, making as much as they can, and saving as much as they can of their per diems to make extra money on the road. They're out there and picking these guys up, and you can see it. I've talked to them, and no other business on the planet besides sports would trust someone making that kind of money to make these kind of decisions. There's no other reasons that you can think of. Like would Apple have like somebody saying, should we buy that company for $20 million? And just pick some guy who's who's making $100,000. There's no way, and $100,000 is a lot for a scout to make. So I think that's.
And let's talk one more thing too. Now it's changed a little bit now because we have the pre-signing period.
Yeah.
But it used to be. I remember this specifically of talking to a GM after he signed a player for a 4-year deal for $22 million, and I said to him, how did he feel when you talked to him about it? And he goes, I haven't even spoken to him. He had just signed a guy for $22 million, and they hadn't even had a basic conversation yet. He had negotiated with his contract. He hadn't talked to the player. Now, what other business where it's not like you have like 20. You really basically have 23 important employees.
Yeah.
And what other business would you invest that amount of money in someone and not even have a conversation with them? It's just all based on their. I don't care how good an accountant is, and you have his reputation. If you're going to hire him, you want to talk to him.
And you gotta meet them, you know. And the players, this was always an issue with the players, sneaking around trying to find out about talents before they signed there because they couldn't talk. I remember one time, Pavel Demitra brought somebody through Vancouver, and they found out, and it was just like he was just a friend of his. He's like, he's visiting me, but the player was actually thinking about, can I move and sign a 5-year deal and move my family to Vancouver? He just didn't know. He wanted to go to Vancouver and see if he could, and that sounded fair to me. So he goes and he visits Demitra to check it, you know, and it was just, and yet it got out and it became a huge story. Oh, it's tampering, and it's like no, I before I sign, all these shouldn't I be allowed to just see what's going on in that city? You know, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just makes sense. You know, if I'm going to leave USA Today, I'm going to go sit and chat with the guy that's going to be my boss. I mean,
right.
You'd want to go to his house and sit in his living room and talk to him.
You might want to do that, and I mean that makes sense to me, and I think that's how you would want to spend some time.
It is.
Let's get started with the show, though. Even though this is the show, and everybody talks, why you say you're starting with the show, and I said I don't know, but I like there to be a definitive beginning and ending. I'm just that kind of person. So here we go. What's the date? And I like to mess. You guys have to watch me mess up the date every day. All right, Thursday, April 23rd. Here we go.
You shouldn't have looked.
What now?
You shouldn't have looked.
I know.
Yeah, but he wants to get it right.
I shouldn't have looked. You're right. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Thursday, April 23rd, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you around 1 p.m. Monday through Friday, or thereabouts, to discuss the hockey world. And we talk about the hockey world a lot, and, you know, it's 1:30 now, but we, you know, make sure you're checking at 1 because we start talking right away.
The intro is only half an hour.
Right. This is my Connor McDavid Edmonton Oilers jersey, by the way. How about that?
Excuse me, I have to be sick.
I know, I thought you'd like that. Yeah.
How could you get that made? I thought you're not allowed to do that.
You aren't. I have friends. I have friends in high places, Russ.
Okay. Because I know that's a no-no.
I have people. You're not allowed to do it because he's not officially there yet.
Right.
And I can't tell you. Or
Okay.
I have to kill you. So yeah, so there you go. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on from that. And the first thing we have to talk about today, of course, is the end of the Winnipeg Jets season. And let me just first by saying, really, you know, I got it wrong. Mike got it wrong. Russ and Kevin got it right on this one. But I'm just sad that it ended because I wanted to go to that building and see a game in that atmosphere. It was just so crazy. You couldn't help but be a Jets fan during this run. It was so obvious to me that, you know, one of the things we talked about before the playoffs is the factors waiting in the playoffs, Kevin, was experience, and this was a series that just reeked of experience. Like that the Ducks just had, you know, yes, your fans are great. Yes, you just scored a goal to go ahead, but you know what? We're the Ducks. We've been here before. We're going to come back, and we're going to make your life a living hell, and that's how it's going to go. You know? Did you get that?
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think, too, we just haven't given the Anaheim Ducks enough credit for being a good team.
Yeah.
You know, if you were watching this series, like, and I adopted the Jets because I just was really appreciative of the work they did to get in the playoffs, and I thought Paul Maurice did a great job, and they hung in there through a number of injuries, and then at the end they had the Byfuglien suspension. And you know, I think they have one of the most underrated lines in the league, obviously with Little and Wheeler and Ladd. So there's a lot to like about them, and I think they have a bright future. I like where they're headed. But you know, when it came into the reason I took the Ducks is I just think all season we just haven't given the Ducks enough credit. You know, we don't talk about them a lot, and they're a good team. Like, they're not a perfect team, but they're a good team, and you know, they were consistent all season. They managed to find a way to be at the top of the standings for, you know, almost from start to finish. And, you know, I think the people that got caught up in the romance of the Jets drive into the playoffs and ignored the fact that the Ducks had been one of the more consistent teams in the league.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Russ.
I was just going to say, I mean, I interviewed Kevin Cheverdayoff twice, and he never once gave us the impression that he thought that this was going to be their year to make the playoffs. There's always that hope, and they're building for the future. So I think that that's just something where they were playing with house money. They made a great trade for Tyler Myers. Whoever thought that Tyler Myers was washed up, shame on you, because he's been playing great. Their goaltending's not solidified. They have better goaltenders down below in Hellebuck and Comrie than they have at the NHL level, but they're just not ready. So I think we're going to see a really great Jets team for a lot of years. It's not this team, but now they got their feet wet. I think that's really what we're looking at.
Well, to me, it was the fact that and clearly, with Corey Perry scoring 3 goals in the 4 games and Ryan Kessler almost scoring a hat trick. He scored 2 goals last night. The key players, the big names, came through for Anaheim and really didn't come through for Winnipeg. I mean, Kessler was one of the more key acquisitions in the offseason last year, and he played well in a sort of a secondary role, sort of blending in with Getzlaf and Perry. But he really came to the forefront in this series. His goals, all occurred at key points. I mean, the game
they
3,
were back-breaking goals. Yeah,
back-breaking goals, tying the game late in game 3. The goal that the 2 goals in Game 4. So he was a key acquisition. And Frederik Andersen, I mean, the concern was that the goaltending situation was a little questionable with Gibson and Andersen. They went with Andersen like they did last year. He played very well, and honestly, I thought Pavelec, at times was really good, but at times he had to make stops and he didn't. So I mean, kudos to Anaheim. They showed up. They're going to have a tough time. I think they'll have a tough time with the winner of Calgary, Vancouver, which I think is going to be Calgary, because if it is Calgary, they're a very quick team, and I believe they played well against them in the regular season. So, I mean, that should be a pretty good matchup if that happens.
All that kept coming to me last night when I was watching, or in the last couple games with Kessler doing what he was doing, is I remember us having a podcast earlier this year where we talked about how Nick Bonino was working out better than Kessler was. And how Vancouver was getting, and there was a point in the season that you could say that where Bonino was really really looking good, and that Kessler just was not. And I remember, but yet here it is. It was definitely a point when we said this, and I remembered it very well. And but Kessler showed that he has timing, and it's again experience. It's just experience. It feels like experience. It feels like Winnipeg. I mean the one thing I didn't get about Winnipeg is going with Pavelec the whole time. I just didn't understand this move to continue with Pavelec the entire time. Russ, you have any thoughts on that one?
I think the thought is, let's just do this, so now we know what we have. They know what they have, and I'm pretty sure they're going to move away from Pavelec now. Because like I said, they've got a lot of goalies in the system. I didn't even mention Hutchinson, like he's in the mix right now. So they got 3 guys to look at, so I don't think Pavelec will be in the mix anymore.
That's interesting, I mean, because he was really good this year. I mean, so if he's not in the mix, he's a goalie that people will look at.
Yeah, but
one more year,
Yeah, I don't think that's an outlandish statement at all. I mean, I think Pavelec has had his chance, and if you're the fans in Winnipeg and you're looking for ways you can improve your team, even though Pavelec was solid, he wasn't among the the top goalies in the league, and I'm sure you're saying to yourself, we could improve there. So, yeah, I could see that as a direction the team could go in. I mean, a lot of us thought even last summer they should look in a different direction, but then Pavelec sort of proved everyone wrong. But in the playoffs, in the games that I've seen, he didn't distinguish himself.
No, he didn't. He didn't any more than not distinguishing himself. He just never came up with that momentum save when they needed it. That was the big thing. There was a couple times when he needed to make a save, and that this series would still be going. He just didn't make those saves in the third period. I mean, they would have been incredible saves. I'm not blaming him necessarily for the goals, but at the same time, he needed to make a couple of them. Just did it. And that he didn't. And now, this is his first time in the playoffs, so now I think he's going to have a little bit of a rep of not being a playoff goalie or what have you. And you're right. I think your teams are going to move on. And speaking of reps of not being a playoff goalie, let's move to Pittsburgh and the Rangers series. This series has had a lot of intrigue to it, and the Rangers are, I'll give them credit. They remind me of I was telling somebody they're a combination of that old Rangers team that that old Penguins. The Penguins I'm giving Penguins a lot of credit here. They remind me of that old Penguins team that used to have Bob Airey on it. And before Mario got there, and was just completely, but they were battling, and yet this team also happens to have like 2 superstars on it as well. But they've got a combination of these things, and that and they've gotten good goaltending, but not quite good enough. What are you thinking on this series, Russ?
Well, I think they, again, are playing that John Tortorella style that the Rangers used to play, because they realize we don't score a lot of goals, and we've got to sort of lock it down the best way we can, and that's what they're doing. But the problem with that whole equation is, while Marc-Andre Fleury is a very good goalie, he has never been a lockdown goalie. He will always give up that one goal that you say, oh, wow, and this one happened to happen in overtime.
Yep.
So when you do that, you've got to have, like Henrik Lundqvist, the guy who is going to lock it down, to play that style. And so I think that's the flaw of this whole series for Pittsburgh is, okay, the big guns aren't coming through, so now we're just going to try and hang in there and hit them and give them a hard time and agitate them. And they're doing all that, but they're not going to win the series. There's no way they're going to win the series.
No, now they're also obviously they're down 3-1, but
I mean I can't lay the blame at the feet of Marc-Andre Fleury for them being down 3-1. I mean, I know you're not saying that, and I know Ek's not saying that, but I'm just saying, the right now the blame squarely for the Penguins being down and probably losing the series is the fact that they're significantly injured. They have half their defensive core that is out. And honestly, a team with Crosby and Malkin that can't score in buckets. I know that you don't score in buckets in the postseason, but with 2 of the most talented offensive players in hockey on the planet, and they can't score, it boggles the mind. And they can't. The Rangers are playing a superior defensive system, but they had problems scoring even when they weren't playing the Rangers during the regular season. So it's got to be something inherent in that team, and that's something that has to be changed.
Yeah, I think actually the Penguins have put up more of a fight than I thought they would. I mean, you cannot compete at the playoff level with the defense they are now trying to compete with no Ehrhoff, no Letang, no Mata. They just don't have the horses to compete. When Lovejoy, who's been a dependable third pairing guy, when he suddenly becomes vital to your defense, that just kind of sums it all. And Malkin is obviously banged up. If you're watching him live, I've seen a game in this series live. I was in Pittsburgh. He's just not the same player. He can't get around. There's something going on there.
Right.
But more importantly, and I think Mike's absolutely right, there's something inherently wrong with the team. I think it's on the wings. And Kunitz has not been the same player he's been in the past. Perron has not played well since early after the trade. They just don't have the scoring depth on the wings. Like I remember I was talking to Eddie Olczyk about 2 weeks ago, and he just pointed out that Crosby is really by himself. That's the way it feels like.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And when he when when they won that game, like, he got a pass, and he, guess what? He drove it in. Like, he still do that when he got a great pass.
right.
So I just don't think they have the guns to compete with the Rangers, and I agree completely with Russ, and I've been saying this for a while, that it's almost the best of both worlds with the Rangers now, because the McDonough, Girardi, Stahl group were taught by the hard-edged Tortorella to play the type of defense you need to play to win in the playoffs. They have that experience in their back pocket. And then you have Vigneault, who has given them the offensive freedom and is easier to play with, so it's a happier bunch. They don't come to the rink with dread. So now it's like the best of both worlds. This Ranger team, I think, with the speed they have, and with that defense, like, the skill level of that defense is so impressive. Dan Boyle is the number 6, kind of defenseman when, when Klein is, back and healthy. That's going to be a pretty phenomenal group.
And you're getting contributions from guys like Hagelin, who, they're not only from their star players, but from guys like Hagelin, and then Kevin Hayes, a free agent signing who scores the game-winning goal in overtime. I mean, the key to any team making a long drive into the playoffs is to not only get performances from their star players, but from their muckers and their grinders, and the Rangers are getting that as well.
Yeah, they're writing that script that we've seen before. This is the script. This is the script that teams write when they go to the Stanley Cup Finals, or or win a Stanley Cup. They feel like that kind of a team. And I think that they'll be better. I think that they'll be better in the next round of the playoffs. I think they're going to get better as this thing goes.
I think so too. We got to remember, and for most of that game, that was a lousy effort by the Rangers. It really was.
Yeah.
The Winds glossed that over.
Right, the Winds, yeah, and they haven't been 100%. Lundqvist still doesn't feel like Lundqvist to me, but he hasn't had to be. He will have to be in the next round. Like he's gonna have to play the Islanders. He's gonna have to play the Capitals. He's gonna have to be Lundqvist again. And I think this is a good warm-up round for him almost. It feels like a warm-up playoff series for the Rangers.
Yeah.
It feels like that's what it feels like. And the Penguins. Before you go into a tournament, you want to play against some teams that are pretty good. It's like the Rangers are playing against a pretty good team here in the Penguins before they go into the other tournament. That's what it feels like. And this is like the Penguins are giving them all they can, but they're not going to beat them unless they get lucky here or there. And Fleury is not my prediction that Fleury would take this to 7 games. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I just had a feeling that Fleury would somehow do that, and it just doesn't. No. At this point, but
now the series that might go to 7 games, Zach, is the one we're going to talk about next, which is Minnesota and St. Louis. Because
this is the one playoff series that is completely unpredictable, like from moment to moment, right? And the rest of them you can sort of sense. Like if you turn on the Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Canadiens midway through the second period because you were out picking up milk for the kids or whatever, you can pretty much guess it's going to be 1-0 or 0-0, one way or the other, right? That's what's going to happen. You come back, if you're with the Predators and the Hawks, it's probably going to be 1-1, 2-2. It's what's going to happen. But you turn on the Wild and Blues, and you just have no idea what to expect. But the Blues' performance in Game 4 was really remarkable. The most remarkable performance I think of the playoffs so far, because they were a team that looked dead to rights after Game 3. And the Wild looked like they couldn't do anything wrong after Game 3.
Well, they did have a big change.
Yeah.
They employed the left wing lock, which Kevin's very familiar with. And I kind of wonder now, is that going to be like the kryptonite for Minnesota? And they seem to damage Dubnyk's confidence. I watched him before they pulled him out of that game, and he was finished, like mentally finished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. And this is a coaching move, this is Hitchcock at his finest. This is Hitchcock looking at film, I'm sure hours and hours and hours of film,
yep,
and figuring out that that guy can't go in the left, because Hitch one thing Hitch is very definitive about things. Like if he thinks something is true, it's not black or white. Like if he thinks a player can't play left wing, that player can't play left wing. If he thinks this player can't carry the puck, that player can't carry the puck, and he'll say that to you every time. Even if that player, I'm like, that player can really carry the puck now. No, he can't carry the puck. He's looking like he can carry the puck, but he can't. So Hitch found something in those videos that that brought on the left wing lock, and suddenly, and then you combine that with what St. Louis, in my opinion, what they did was they went to a counterattack team, right? Which is sort of the left wing lock, but they became a counterattack team. And the Blues are really at their best when they are a counterattack team. But the problem with, and a lot of teams are, it's not actually, most teams are. Few teams can be attack teams. Most teams actually are better as counterattack teams. The Penguins are always better as counterattack team. But because it's hard to play against a counterattack team. But the Blues, when they're the better teams in the league, always feel like they shouldn't be the counterattack team. They should be the team that's bringing the play. And the Blues, I think, in the first 3 games wanted to be the team that was bringing it. They let the Wild come to them, and they fell right into their trap. Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. I'm an NFL fan too, as everyone knows, and I always say the NFL 16-game schedule is really a 32-game schedule, because every NFL game, in my opinion, is 2 games within one. There's the first half and then the second half. Anybody who follows their team knows that what happens in the second half is always completely different, because it's a game of adjustments. At halftime, with all the still photos that are taken, they break everything down. They figure out where their vulnerabilities are, and they make assessments. We do less of that in the NHL, but there are guys who are really good at that, and Hitchcock is one of those. And I think the adjustments that he's making, it reminds me, Claude Julien is also masterful at that as well.
Right.
The year that they won the Cup, I thought he was great, especially in game, of adjusting to what other teams were doing. So, when you got 2 teams that are both capable of winning the Cup, like Minnesota and St. Louis, those type of moves are become ultra important. And I just think this series, if it went best of 13, it'd end up 7-6, and if it was best of 15, it'd be 8-7. These are two evenly matched teams, and they're both teams that, in my opinion, that are capable of going all the way. So, and each game has had a completely different identity.
Yeah, and it was completely dominant by Minnesota in Game 3 and completely dominant by St. Louis in Game 4 for varying reasons. I mean, if you looked at what St. Louis did, all four lines scored. They get a goal out of Ryan Reeves, and then 3 goals in the first 10 minutes of the first period. And I mean, if there is any momentum from winning in Game 3, it was snuffed out in the first 10 minutes of the first period. And then Minnesota gets a goal early in the second period to give them a little bit of hope in terms of climbing back into the game, and St. Louis scores a couple minutes later to quash that hope. So, I mean, Game 5 is going to be really a battle, but I like I said, I thought this series was going to go to 7. I picked Minnesota. I think anybody who picked St. Louis in 7 is not far off. It's going to probably be a 7 game and probably go into overtime or be a 1-goal game, so it'll be interesting.
We don't see these kind of series. Like the typical close series between two good teams are what we're seeing in Nashville and Chicago. Like you don't see this very often. This sort of reminds me of the Flyers-Penguins series a couple years ago, that just every game had its own dynamic to it, right? Where a game could just be a blowout one way or the other, and yet they still go 6 or 7 games, but only because But it's not like what we're seeing in Nashville and Chicago is just tight hockey. Like back in no one's ever more than one goal ahead type hockey.
I would say that it felt like last night's game, as it just sort of gives St. Louis the edge, and because I think they've established once again how difficult they are to play against. Like I like the Wild team a lot, but I just think the Blues are harder to play against, and I think that team survives in the postseason. So, we'll see. And Tarasenko obviously has, continued on where he left off in the regular season, just establishing what a dangerous player he is.
Oh, for sure. I muted you, Rush. You can unmute yourself. I thought I would mute you while you went and made your omelet there. You have to unmute yourself.
Sign language.
Not making omelet. No, I got a lot going on. People working.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, they just. It looked like from my vantage point, you went back, opened the refrigerator, took out an egg, some cheese.
Where's the scallions?
I remember I told you that Tarasenko injured is still better than most players in the NHL because of his heart, and I think he's proved that. Because remember, he's injured now, but he's still great.
Yeah, he is great, and but let's go into the other series as well. That's going to take over tonight, of course, which is the Predators and Hawks series, and this is the series that is killing me because I have to get up. I've had to get up early after every one of these games for whatever reason, and it's just literally destroying us to have to stay up. I mean, when you have to stay up till 2:30 in the morning, East Coast time, to watch a game, it's just really it's tricky. But you cannot go to sleep. There's the golden rule. I have never gone to sleep during an overtime of an NHL game. I will not allow myself to do it, no matter how tired I am. I will not do it.
I found a way.
Yeah.
I haven't done it. I thought I was going to. That game, that triple overtime game, I was out cold in the second period. I was tired. I was lying in bed, out cold in the second period. Woke up as the third period was ending, and I'm like, oh, damn it. Now I got to watch this over. So I stayed up then 3 periods.
Maybe it's just a product of me getting old, but the famous Capitals Islanders was a quadruple overtime Pat LaFontaine goal on Bob Mason. I stayed up for that one, and the Keith Primo one, which was four overtimes. I stayed up for that one. Yep. This one, I second overtime intermission. I drifted off, and I woke up in the morning to watch the goal. But it was
you didn't miss much if you drifted off in the second overtime intermission.
Yeah,
that was pretty. That game ended pretty. I mean, now this. It was pretty remarkable to me what the Predators did without Shea Weber in that game. I mean, that's a game. If ever you need Shea Weber, it's a triple overtime game in Chicago. I mean, there's no more purpose to have Shea Weber than if you're going to go 3 overtimes in Chicago. I mean, that's just to not have him in there. I kept thinking to myself, at some point, Shea Weber would have done something to end this game in those first 2 overtimes, or help them avoid losing the game in the third. It is just that Shea. And what we're really seeing, honestly, is Seth Jones is playing out of his mind. I mean, and he's not even playing the most, but Ekholm's playing out of his mind. This Predators team has so many good defensemen. I mean, it's crazy. But Seth Jones had that one in the second period where he drifts. He comes in, basically carries the puck up on a 3-on-2, and makes the move, and then spins around and made a bad pass. But Seth Jones had the game on his stick in my mind. At that point, he makes the bad play back. But
this is the thing. I think what this series exposes is the fact that, I mean, you look at the Predators, and even without Shea Weber, how great that their defense is. But the fact that they match up against the Blackhawks, who have who have Shaw, Taves, Brad Richards up the middle, and they match up with Mike Ribeiro and Philip Forsberg, and it's no contest. And I think that is the main determining factor of why the Blackhawks are going to win this series, is because of the strength up the middle. And what David Poile has to come to the realization is he may have to trade from a position of strength to reinforce the area of weakness on that team, which is up the middle. I mean, Ribeiro was a one-year patch. They need something as a long-term solution up the middle, and I don't know if that's like we speculated, trading with Edmonton for somebody like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or whatever, but they need help up the middle.
Yeah, I got a text from somebody this is really interesting, Kev. You would like this. So it's in the middle of the second overtime, and I get this text saying, "See what's happening right now?" And I'm, what do you mean? And he says, "Well, right now, I've always said that this is an old coach in hockey. I've always said that by the second or third overtime of a playoff game, you will see who the better team is on the ice." He said, "You can get through one period and hide it. You can get through 2 periods and hide it, 3 periods, but eventually, fourth or fifth period, you're going to see the better team starts to take over." Because the Hawks were taking over. They just were. They have more depth. They were cycling the puck. The Predators were unable to cycle the puck in the Chicago end. There were certain things that were happening you could just see, and yeah, I mean, I still think, would they have Pecorine? I still want to see this game go at least 6, but, it's a tough. I mean, they've already played 6 games in the series, but yeah, it's going to be. I want to see it go past tonight for the Predators' sake. I just think that they deserve the. Kevin, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was going to bring up you brought that up, and I always like to remind people of the conversation I had with Igor Larionov, who didn't when he was playing, even though he scored a triple overtime goal, an important goal in Red Wings history, did not like the play until dawn overtime format of the NHL. He felt that the reason I didn't like it and why he preferred a shootout, like they do in the World Cup of Hockey or World Cup of soccer, is that in overtime he feels it just becomes a battle of fatigue. Yeah. That the skilled team, the skill is.
Yeah. Kevin is frozen.
I like that battle, though.
The important hold up. I just think kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, you broke up on us. Second, Kevin, there. You broke up a little bit on us.
I like the battle of fatigue. I'm for that. I think you do need to show what you are and what you're made of, sort of, in those things. And to answer Mike's point about a center, Kevin Fiala, who they drafted last year, even though he's only going to be 19 next year, he had 20 points in 33 games as a center for Milwaukee this year. He might be that fix. And also, I think we're seeing with Shea Weber out, the underutilization of Ryan Ellis, and maybe somebody would actually make a trade for him because he could be a top pairing defenseman in the NHL, but he's not going to be in Nashville behind Seth Jones and Shea Weber. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, they have 5 top pairing defensemen on that team. I think.
Yeah,
I really do. And that's unbelievable, really.
But even when you move Yossi up, Ellis is going to be the odd man out.
Yeah, and that's incredible that Ellis is that. Like you said, Ellis is way too talented to be the odd man out on any team. That's just nuts. And they have to. Poyle loves his defenseman, but they have to realize this. I mean, they have to. And this is why I said that there's no better suited teams than Edmonton and Nashville to make a trade this summer. They absolutely have the perfect combinations. Edmonton with getting McDavid, they have to move one of those forwards. The Predators really should move one of these defense. There's a way of making this. There's a deal there, Whatever that deal is, there's a deal there. There are 2 teams that just need to make this happen. And Rene has, I think with Weber out, and I said this before, he just looks like he's trying to do too much, and that's costing him. He's overcommitting, and it happened again in that game too. He made some incredible saves, but he's he's not, you know, he's not. He's such an unconventional goalie. People don't realize how unconventional Rene is. He really is.
He's not been the same since he's come back from injury, though. He was locked down before the injury, and since then he has not been locked down, even with Weber there, and that surprises me too.
Well, the difference before the injury, and because I saw him play I was in Nashville and I saw the Flyers play there before the injury, and where I was convinced Rene was the best goalie in the NHL because he was absolutely he was locked down, but he still, even in that game, was unconventional. Like he's very active in there. He's got a little bit of like a Hextall thing going on to him, where he's moving around all the time. He's never stationary, which is really strange for Finnish goalies who are usually incredibly stationary. He's definitely he's fascinating. He's really fun to watch. But he also, you can see that he's trying too hard right now. And in goalies, you know, you have to be a little bit more you know, conservative.
But Kevin, as we well know, the real fault for the Nashville downfall is Carter Hutton.
Well, yes, and we've seen this clearly. We've seen this clearly in other series, guys. I want to bring this up, okay? We've seen this playing in plenty of in other series, and they just have to look across the ice to see what a backup goalie can mean in a situation. I mean, it's like it's not that out of question. You know, I'm just saying. Would Michael Neuwirth get a shot in the series right now? Yes, he would. So at some point he would. That's my theory. At some point in one of these games. In Game 3, Neuwirth would have played for a little while. Rene could have gotten out of there. Gotten a break.
Here's the thing, though. Cam Talbot is the best backup goalie. You know why? Because he's the first guy at the end of the game to congratulate Henrik Lundqvist. The minute your backup has to play meaningful minutes in the playoffs, most times you're going to lose. It worked for Carolina with, you know, getting rid of Gerber and putting Cam Ward in, but most times you are not going to go far that way.
It's working for Chicago. It's working to a degree for Ottawa.
Not going to work forever for Chicago. It won't.
Yeah, and well, let me just have the final word on this.
I promise it will be the final time we talk
of Chicago and Nashville. The biggest problem that the Predators have in this series is the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're talking what's wrong with the Predators, but you know their biggest problem is the Blackhawks are still the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
And you know you got Patrick Sharp on the third line. You know when you got Patrick Sharp and Bickle on the third line, you've got a pretty deep offense. And you know they've got their defense have a lot of guys that have been around the block, and they know what they're doing. And Darling was a 1B option for a pretty extended period this season. You know, Crawford was injured, so he's not your typical backup goalie. Like he's in a short period of time become a pretty strong favorite of Quenneville. I mean, this Blackhawks team is still a very, very good and deep team, and they have a lot of options. So you know, this isn't. I don't see Darling as a Hutton type backup. I think he's more than that.
He's more. They signed Darling to an extension, and he beat Ranta out for the number 2. So it's clear that he's got more confidence. And it's strange because Darling was with Milwaukee last year, was in the Nashville organization last year, and now he's probably going to slam the door on that organization.
That's true. I agree. I'm sorry to get rid of this thing. All right, let's before we get out of here today. There was something I wanted to say, and I just lost it. Damn it.
Rest in peace, Trade Simulator.
Yes, I know. It's the draft simulator is horrible. We need to create our own. It's done. We have to create our own, whatever it can be. We need ideas out there.
The one final word about, because I think it's interesting, the discussion about what the Oilers need to do to prepare for the arrival of Connor McDavid, and I missed the discussions when I was out covering a practice when you guys had that, but I'm among those that believe they needed to trade the guy, but I think they need to embrace the lessons learned from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that is that you have to have enough wingers to take care of both both your centers, and I think that's why you got to trade Nugent Hopkins.
I agree.
I think you have to keep your wingers because the Penguins have never had enough wingers to play with both Crosby and Malkin. So I think that's what you got to do. You keep Draisaitl, who's a bigger center, and McDavid, and then you keep Everly, you keep Hall. You got Yakupov, who now it appears that they believe in him enough to give him a bridge contract, and then you develop another big center, or excuse me, a big winger, and you're pretty happy with that group. So that he'd be the guy that I trade, and I think you can solve your biggest problem, because I think you could get a premium defenseman for Nugent Hopkins.
Yeah, doesn't that seem like a good Predators trade too? Doesn't that seem like a Predators move that they could make?
Sure.
And what I think Edmonton also has to do, first of all, I think they need to get a goaltender. I think Scrivens is a backup in the NHL, but not a starter. So I think they need to get a number one goaltender either by trade or by free agency. I think they need at least 2 quality top 4 NHL defensemen. That's not going to be easy. But it can be done by trading a Nugent Hopkins. What I think they need to emulate Pittsburgh. What they did was they went out and got Gary Roberts when Crosby was a young player. Gary Roberts was a good influence on Crosby and a lot of the young players in that organization. I think that Edmonton needs to go out and find their Gary Roberts to provide a little leadership, provide a little veteran direction on that team. They have some guys in place like Pouliot and Ferentz, but I think they need more of that, because that group of number 1 picks, they're all under the age of 23 years old. There are not a lot of grown-ups on that team. It doesn't seem like there are a lot of grown-ups, and I think they need to add a grown-up or 2 to provide some leadership.
I can see it now. Craigslist. Be my Gary Roberts. There's the title for the show.
Hey, the way that Gary Roberts works out, he might be able to help him right now.
He could probably play right now. You're absolutely right. All right, guys, that's all the time we have.
Fish. He's a chef.
Right. Well, they bring it right back to fish. Absolutely. We'll end the show where we began. Salmon is the fish of the poor. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon. And if you're sticking around, listening on the Hockey Buzz radio network, I guess we'll call it for now, the Cranky Hockey Writers show is starting right after this in about 10 minutes time. So, so Eric Tahashik will be joining Kevin and I, and we will talk about, we didn't get to all the series, we'll talk about those, and we'll also get Eric's interesting look from out west and up north. We'll talk to you soon. Without the buzz, it is just hockey. See you then.